Got my eyes straight ahead, got my head in the game. With the red light on, I'm just waiting for the change. Keep my head down low.
Hi, Jay Fallon here, and this is the Slippery Slope. And I'm also, just if in case you don't know, I'm going to be putting this episode and all other episodes that do with police. I also put them up on the other channel, Aussie Police Watch, uh, for several reasons, but I won't get into that right now. But you can watch this on Aussie Police Watch as well as the Slippery Slope. And please like, subscribe, check it out on Aussie Police Watch if you get a chance as well. So I want to go over this story. This article just came out. The reason why I'm so interested in this Hannah Thomas story, situation, issue, Hannah Montana Thomas, so is because she's got, not that I don't know, I don't think she's got a lot of influence or power. However, she's connected. She's got a lot of friends. She's got influence, connections, political influence, and political connections. And I think that her case with her injury, this is the young lady who had her eye injured when she was involved in a protest, a pro-Palestine protest. So the thing is, I do feel I feel sorry for her. She's been injured, but and there's been calls by the Greens to have the charges pulled, the charges dropped by police. Now, I'm definitely against that because I think these things, there's been all these calls, that the new laws, these new powers that were being given to the police in New South Wales about being able to arrest people involved in a protest if it's near a religious venue. They've been called draconian and all this, and they've you know, Hannah and the Greens and some Labor MPs have had pot shots at the government and pot shots about these laws. But I think you've got the opportunity. She's been injured. You should go and test it while you've got that opportunity. That's what I think. So you need to go and test it. So we could see, and I don't agree with her reasoning for doing the protest. I'm not behind the protest, but I think she has the right to protest, even if I don't agree with it. That's fine. But a couple of things that can be tested. You will be able to test these new powers that are given to police. You need to be able to hold the police accountable because she did get quite seriously injured. So you need to be able to hold the police accountable and make sure that they were behaving. If they were behaving within the confines of these new powers, well, were they still acting? I mean, she's been quite seriously injured. So was their behavior, were the actions that they took, were they absolutely necessary? She is such a small girl. Was it actually necessary, given the injury that she sustained? But also, you need to be able to look at her actions and the Greens and the way they've behaved. So I think there's a lot of things that if you're on the other side of politics, you're looking at and you sit there and think, well, the police need to be held accountable, and the Greens, they're not a lot better when it comes to these things. And these protesters, what are they all about? And they shouldn't be out there doing some of the things that they're doing. But it's a good way for someone like myself who's looking at all these different issues, saying, well, this is a good testing ground to have all these things. Everything's converged, and we can have all these things tested in the courts. And that's why I think this case is so interesting. And I think that it should go ahead. And I really don't like it when, as I said in the other video, when politicians jump in and try and influence law enforcement. They were telling the commissioner, telling the premier, hey, go and pressure the commissioner and get these charges dropped. I think that is wrong, absolutely wrong. Let's check out this article anyway that's just come up. Okay, so Hannah Thomas's injury sparks questions over New South Wales protester rights and what does it actually say? Good question. The altercation between police and protesters that left Hannah Thomas in hospital with a serious eye injury has reanimated a perennial issue in New South Wales, the right to protest. So, is there actually a right to protest? This is just going in New South Wales. There is not an express right to protest in New South Wales, but it's covered in common law and by the Australian Constitution, which the High Court has found implies the right to freedom of political communication. I would argue, but that do you really have freedom of political communication when it's to do with two with with another country. There's right to freedom of political communication if it's all to do with the political parties or the political life of Australia. But if it's all to do with the political life of another nation altogether in another region, is that really the right? Anyway, so governments cannot create laws that significantly impede this right, but as we know, they always do. They always create laws that impede our rights. However, there are many laws that critics claim have eroded it, which is why I'm saying it would be good if this case went to court. So courts can overturn such laws if they are found to be constitutionally invalid and have done so. Tim Roberts, the president of the New South Wales Council of Civil Liberties, says a protest itself cannot be considered unlawful. Remember that. So, however, an individual protester can be charged with an offence based on their conduct during the protest. For example, if they fail to comply with the move on direction by police. Okay, so another question. Do protests require approval or authorization from police? No. However, you remember, but this is New South Wales specifically talking about at the moment. So, however, protest organisers can apply to police ahead of time using a notice of intention to hold a public assembly, commonly known as the Form 1 process. Protesters submit the form to New South Wales Police outlining details such as which roads the protest intends to march along. It is not mandatory for organisers to use this process, but if they do, the police accept the details on the form. Protesters can be protected from being charged. If police oppose the Form 1, a court has the final say. Earlier this year, the court sided with police after they knocked back a Form 1 submitted by the climate group Rising Tide, which planned to blockade the Newcastle port. Organisers went ahead with the protest regardless. The court decision simply means the protesters were not protected from being charged under protest laws if, for example, they obstructed a major facility or failed to comply with a move on direction. Okay, so when can police issue the move on direction? Police move on powers are limited if the protest has an approved Form 1. For protests that don't, which tend to be snap protests, the Law Enforcement Powers and Responsibilities Act, LEPRA, states, that would be in Australia, in New South Wales. In Queensland, we have the Police Powers and Responsibilities Act. I'm assuming that would be the same. Anyway, so the PPRA states that police may use a move-on order if protesters obstruct traffic or a person poses a serious risk to someone else's safety. But in February, police powers were expanded in laws that one Labor MP reportedly described during an internal meeting as the most draconian change to protest laws in decades. Under the change, police can issue a move-on order if a protest is taking place near a place of worship. Semantics, people, this is what happens. The protest does not need to be directed at the place of worship or even about religion. So it's just in the vicinity, really. And this is the problem. The legislation does not define near. This is at the police's discretion. And this is something I think, this is why it needs to be tested, because when you create these laws, but it's just at the police officer's discretion, that is always going to be an issue. It needs to be challenged. So sites in Sydney where protests commonly take place, such as Town Hall and Hyde Park, are close to places of worship. Police are required to give a move on direction as a first warning. If a protester does not comply, they can be arrested and charged. This law has been mired in controversy. It was passed as part of a suite of reforms aimed at curbing anti-Semitism, and which are now the subject of an inquiry exploring whether Parliament was misled before passing the laws. The catalyst for the laws was not a religious event, but a protest outside a synagogue at which a member of the Israel Defense Forces was speaking. It is also facing a constitutional challenge from the Palestine Action Group. Other laws have been introduced in recent years primarily to target climate protests. In 2020, 2022, The then New South Wales Liberal government legislated, with support from Labor, a maximum penalty of 2 years in prison and a $22,000 fine for protesters who obstruct facilities such as ports and transport hubs. The penalty also applies to protests on main roads. So what are the objections to the laws? David Majaya Canales, a senior lawyer at the Human Rights Law Centre, says people feel they must get permission for a protest, even though that is not the case. But it's a bit of, police do this, or the government does this quite often. It's, they kind of bamboozle people and pretend they put on this facade like, yep, you have to get our permission so many times in different things, and yet we don't have to. He says this feeds into language used by police, such as the protest being unauthorized. They used that in those reports the other day. In New South Wales, the anti-protest regime is probably the most dire in the country, he says. He says this is for multiple compounding reasons, including that New South Wales has more anti-protest laws than any other state. New South Wales also has the second highest maximum financial penalty for obstructing main roads and major facilities. South Australia has the highest maximum financial penalty at $50,000. Majaya Canals also says the laws are broad and vague. Governments love writing up broad and vague laws, don't they? Which make it a challenge for protesters to know whether or not they broke the law. Quite often, the police don't even know whether they've actually broken the law either. Police have been given a lot of discretionary powers. Discretionary powers, as far as I'm concerned, discretionary powers, bad. Over applying protest law and also via the Form 1 system, he adds. The centre has argued more than 49 laws introduced by federal and state governments over the past 2 decades have eroded the right to protest. Look, getting back to what I said at the beginning of this episode, this is why I really am behind. I would encourage Hannah Thomas and the Greens to take this matter up and have it argued out before the courts, because it needs to be tested in the courts. I really detest the fact that the Greens have tried to influence law enforcement and get them to drop the charges. That is despicable. If you really believe in it, you wanted to go and put it all on social media. But if you really believe in it, well, then fight for it in the courts. Get it tested properly. It would be for the betterment of the whole nation, for everyone in New South Wales, for everyone. It would be for the betterment, because then we can know when you can protest and what the limits are. Things need to be tested. Don't shy away. I'm not sure the Greens have the heart to not shy away. I'm not really sure. I'm not convinced the Greens as a party really believe in the things that they preach. But that's just my opinion. I really believe that this needs to be tested. I think the police and their actions on that day caused them fairly significant injury. So they need to be held accountable, and it needs to come down and say, and in an open court where we can see, okay, this is the action that police took. Was it actually heavy-handed? Don't shy away from fighting a matter in court, I say, when you're given the opportunity and if you have the means, the funds, the resources to argue something. As this is all my opinion. That's all it is. Let me know what you think, and check out my music if you get a possible chance. I'm Jay Fallon. Thanks for listening to the Slippery Slope and Aussie Police Watch.
And say it isn't real, and please don't go away. Just give me one more day. What if I could turn back time? I'd make you smile again. And if I could unbreak your heart, and we could start again. What if I could turn back time? I'd make you smile again. And if I could unbreak your heart, and we could start again. start again, again. We could start again.